What improved your quality of life so much you wish you did it sooner? Before we start with the first story, please hit subscribe and ring the notification bell to stay updated with us. Story 1. Stop working more than 40 hours a week. Not everyone is so conscientious as to enjoy dedicating their life to their job, and that's okay. Also, business owners too often don't understand why their employees aren't as dedicated to them. Well, it's because it's their business, not ours. The company doing better often has no benefit for the employees. In the good old days, you'd get a large bonus based on your performance and company performance and have a clear path for advancement. A job is not always a career. Don't treat it like one. Story 2. Stop watching the news. Life's way better without it. The news industry has been shipping fear, propaganda, unreflected and unchallenged views for decades, so in essence that is true. For people still needing a connection to current events, my suggestion is to follow sources that are either local, positive, detailed, aggregate, or conversational. These are all factors that make the news more valuable than a random tweet, which is what most news are these days. Reddit actually provides most of this if you follow some subreddits on a weekly or monthly basis only, using the top filter. Story 3. 53 years old woman here. A hottie in my youth. The relief and freedom with not feeling like my worth is dependent on my looks is palpable. I stopped dyeing my hair during quarantine, and now I have this wild silver streak in the front that I love. I think I'm going to grow it long again and fully rock the witch vibe. Why? 'Cause I'm old enough to no longer give a crap about other people's judgment. Also, a lot of more substantial lessons about life and living and death. Edit. Thank you, kind strangers, for all the awards. That was really super sweet and made me smile. Hope you're all having wonderful days. Story 4. Learning to get over myself. Nobody cares what I do. Nobody is looking at me, and why should I care if they are? Nobody outside my circle has enough context to make accurate judgments about how I live, so why am I trying so hard to justify my decisions? As soon as I adopted that mindset, being alive got significantly less crap. I do my best to be a decent person and to take care of myself, and the only opinions I care about are mine, my partner's, and my therapist's. Story 5. Roomba. OMG, not having to sweep dog/cat hair daily is such a blessing. Edit. Lots of replies. It's 4:30 a.m. I'm on my phone instead of my PC. Thanks for the awards. To answer the more obvious questions, it's an iRobot Roomba 694. It has not sucked up dog poop, but it cleaned up cat vomit, only leaving a little on the floor, like a mop or spray and rag would need to be used anyway. The dirt tray has a microfilter and a collection area. You push one button and it comes out and you dump it in the trash. It does get under my dining room table because it just barely fits through the chair legs. It does get stuck in my cabinet, but I have it running when I'm usually home for lunch and can save it. It works on hard surfaces and carpets. Mine does not map the room that I'm aware of. It does not have a forward sensor at all, just bumps into things and senses that way. That's all. Story 6. I was very shy and self-conscious, but at some point I started just living how I wanted. I already wasn't popular, so what was I risking? Girls still wouldn't be interested? I guess I just started doing things I'd been afraid to do before, including being more outgoing. I know this sounds like generic advice, but it really worked for me. Every time your brain says, no, that wouldn't work out, or no, what would people think, or any other version of no, don't try. It's a perfect opportunity to do something you feel drawn to. Dye your hair pink. Try painting even though you know you'll suck at it. Fart and then say it was me. Okay, maybe not the last one. Story 7. Taking vitamin D supplements and getting a therapy lamp for the winter. Holy crap, does it make a difference? I realized after my first year of university that the reason I didn't do well in the winter semester was because I was feeling depressed and exhausted due to lack of sunlight. I live in Canada, so the days are way shorter in winter. So when you leave before the sun rises, get home after it sets, and wear a coat all day so your skin is exposed to no sunlight, you miss a lot of vitamin D. So I take vitamin D supplements each morning to make up for what I'm missing, and I use a therapy lamp to simulate sunlight in the morning. You feel way more energized and awake during the day. I would highly recommend it to anyone who feels exhausted in winter. P.S. If you're interested in a therapy lamp, look up SAD lamp or seasonal affective disorder lamp. Edit. Wow, thanks for the award. Story 8. Learning to be okay with saying no and starting off all relationships, personal and professional, with healthy boundaries. You don't ever need an excuse to say no if you don't want to do something. Don't feel like going out with friends that night? No thank you. Don't want to work an extra shift at your place of employment if it's not mandatory? No thanks, boss. Boundaries are amazing, and when set from the beginning, they are much easier to maintain for your own mental well-being. Edit. Well, this has become my highest upvoted comment. Thanks to everyone who responded with stories related to boundary setting, and stay strong if you still struggle with this. Story 9. A big thing is actually just saying no rather than avoiding the situation by not confronting it. I remember in my mid-20s when my social life started to change, people just getting busier or getting married, etc. I can't even begin to tell you how many invites to hang out, or when I asked if someone could do something, I just got ignored. One time a friend said she wouldn't respond to invites if she didn't want to go, and I'm just like, do you have any idea how bad people feel when they're just ignored? Seriously, it crushed me when people just didn't respond or blew off my invites. I stopped inviting them to do things and friendships fizzled out. However, I do remember the people who would say things like, "This weekend doesn't work for me, let me know about next time." Or, "I don't really like hiking, but thanks for the invite." Story 10. Accepting at 28 that I was a very emotional guy and letting myself cry whenever I needed to. I swear I cried constantly for about a year straight, as if catching up on all the feelings I repressed my whole life. However, it tapered off about a year ago, and it kinda sucks. It's as if I literally grew thicker skin through truly allowing myself to feel the painful things I felt, and it's become increasingly difficult to cry like I used to. It felt really good to just let everything out. Story 11. Eating healthy. It's amazing after you realize how much you feel like crap after you just took down a double cheeseburger, extra large fries, and a large Coke, but at the time, you don't realize it and just think you're tired. Good eating habits and exercising changed my life. After being diagnosed with diabetes 5 months ago, it was a slap on the face. I also grew up with tons of relatives and a mom who had it, but never learned to rein in their diet. I decided to eat as many greens as humanly possible. Fiber, fiber, fiber. At some point, my migraines left. At some point, my midday sleepiness went away. At some point, my pockmarks and acne spots went away. And then finally, the excess 30 lbs that I've been trying to kick melted away. I don't have the itis after meals. I feel so comfortable going for an impromptu walk, hike, lugging in large packages, grocery hauls. It's wild. I never realized I was probably eating only 2 cups of veggies a day. Story 12. I cut my mother out of my life a few years ago, and I wish I had done it as soon as I moved out, just as I did to my father. My life has been so much better since she hasn't been in it. I feel better about myself, I'm not being treated badly, and I can do what I want without fearing judgment. I'm glad I never reconciled either. From what I hear from siblings, she hasn't changed a bit. She still has to be right all the time, she still lies about crap, and she still pulls authoritarian nonsense. I've pretty much written her off. She has 7 years left to come to me, apologize for the nasty crap she did, take responsibility for aforementioned actions, and prove she has changed or is in the process. But if she doesn't do that within the next 7 years, there's no way I'd reconcile with her. Story 13. Starting antidepressants. I literally am a different person than I used to be, in a good way. I feel more confident in myself, more caring about other people while still having very defined boundaries. Life-changing. I used to be scared that they were going to turn me into a different person, in a bad way, that I would lose all the parts of me that were empathetic and emotional. It's true, I do feel emotions a little less deeply, used to be debilitating, but honestly it's such a welcome change from the person that used to be stuck replaying negative feelings over and over. Obviously, drugs don't solve everything, but at least it gets me out of bed in the morning so I can actually try to make progress. And say no to people. I'm glad to see someone else also took the dive and is doing well. Story 14. Testosterone therapy. I was late 30s and miserable. Drinking too much, bad depression, lethargy, the works. I googled my symptoms and everything was point to low T, but my doctor refused to put me on T, saying my numbers were within the acceptable range. The acceptable range is 200 to 800 for all men 18 to 80. I was at 200. Went to a pay-to-play clinic and they put me on T that same day. A few months later, it started working and everything in my life got better. Sitting here 6 to 7 years later, I get a weekly injection and I'm about as happy as I can be. Tell everyone I know that if nothing else, get your numbers checked so you know where you are. And these days, more and more places are offering female hormone therapy that has the same effect as T does on men. Story 15. CPAP. Best I can figure, my sleep apnea started around 14 years old. I didn't get it diagnosed or treated until 35. Literally in 1 week, I went from sleeping 12 plus hours a day and still being exhausted to 6 to 7 and being perky. My memory and motivation is vastly better. Also, I might have been dead by now if I hadn't got it treated. If only I could have afforded healthcare in my 20s, I might be retired by now. If a loved one snores, stops, then shifts a bit in their sleep multiple times, yeah, they might want to get tested for sleep apnea. Getting it treated is such an improvement of quality and quantity of life. What's a fact that could save your life? Before we start with the first story, please hit subscribe and ring the notification bell to stay updated with us. Story 1. You should still attempt to dial 911 in an emergency even if you have no bars of signal. There are protocols that allow your phone to bounce signals off any tower available, including military/first responder ones and towers not on your network in the event that you attempt to call 911. Please ignore that viral post about changing your voicemail. Spoiler, you can't, and now you've wasted your battery when you could have called 911. Also along the lines of dialing 911. The other week, I witnessed a seemingly very drunk driver swerving all over the road in front of me. I know we shouldn't call 911 unless it's a dire emergency. Maybe that situation could have been classified as one, although thankfully he did pull over before anyone got hurt. But I was in a state I do not reside in and could not find the non-emergency phone number. So, I said F it and called 911 anyway, and they swiftly redirected my call to the traffic control people. It's better to call 911 than be a bystander. Story 2. Teach your kids that if they're ever separated from you, to find any closest adult in emergencies. The likelihood of the next person you would walk up to being a pedophile are slim to none. But the odds increase dramatically waiting for the first person to approach a child alone. This has blown up with people talking about who the child should find, and I'm surprised no one added teaching your young children what your parents' names are. One time recently I overheard a child yelling "Mom," and while helping her, I told her it's important to yell her mom's actual name. Story 3. Don't mix bleach with anything but water. Eons ago, I was doing laundry and had a shirt I was trying to get some kind of speckling out from. I tried soaking it in vinegar, and that didn't work, so then I decided to try bleach, as the shirt was a white shirt, and the label didn't say not to. Well, of course, I just plunged the shirt into the little tub of bleach without rinsing the vinegar from it first. Thankfully, my brain recognized the smell of chlorine fairly fast, though I was confused why. Looked down and saw the vapors rushed the bucket outside and opened every window and door in the place. Luckily, all I had was some irritating coughing that subsided as I stayed outside. But even that coughing was the result of only about 10 seconds of exposure. Story 4. Baking soda will extinguish a fire, even grease and electrical fires. You should always keep a box of it nearby when you're cooking and grilling. And scan your entire cooking area. In case of a grease fire, ask yourself, what can catch on fire? All flammable materials, pot holders, paper towels, wooden utensils, cooking oils, etc., should be 3 feet from the cooking space. It's also good at extinguishing heartburn. Recommend keeping it near the bedside to splash in a cup of water. Also helps if a real fire starts in the bedroom, not the kinky kind. Story 5. You lose heat 20 times faster when wet versus being dry. Shed wet clothes. Explains a lot. I ran a 10-mile race and it was pouring rain. Was wearing leggings and a hoodie. I was soaked by the end of the race. Friends wanted to celebrate and I didn't have time to go change, so I went to the restaurant wet. I was shivering despite getting soup to eat. Developed a cold a couple days later. Lesson learned, get out of wet clothes. Fun fact, Norwegian fishermen would deliberately get their thick felted wool mittens wet when out in their boats. This would cause a protective ice shield to form on the outside, keeping their hands toasty warm. Story 6. Don't pull a knife or anything else out of a puncture wound. The object may very well be keeping you from bleeding out. Only a medical professional should remove something stuck in you. On a related note, if something is impaling an eye you want to leave it in, make a donut-shaped bandage to hold it in place, and cover both of their eyes, because if you leave their good eye open they'll look around and your eyes move together, so bad things happen. Similarly, if someone has a crush injury and you don't know how long they've been there, unless they're able to tell you it just happened, don't release them. If it's been more than 15 minutes, you could do more harm than good, as there are all sorts of nasty things that can happen when it's released that could be the end of the patient if trained staff aren't on hand. Story 7. If you get lost in the wilderness, the best thing to do is to stay calm and stay put. Unless there is an immediate threat to your safety in the area, just sit down and wait for someone to come find you. Many people die or get seriously injured because they keep moving and search and rescue can't catch up to them. Best thing to do is always carry a deck of cards. If you're ever lost in the woods, just stay put and use the deck of cards to play solitaire. Eventually, someone will come along and tell you how to play your next move. Story 8. Do not, I repeat, do not lay in the snow or walk home alone in the cold when you are far too drunk. I had a friend die from hypothermia and alcohol poisoning because she wanted to take a nap in the snow. Edit. The typical I did not expect this, but wow, it's crazy how many people have experienced this and had some close calls. I am so thankful for all of your lovely comments. She would be very happy that I mentioned this. I've had a couple of cases wandering alone in a blizzard back to my cottage from the pub. The snow was calling me more than once, but some sober voice from the back of my head always tells me to go home before giving up. Sorry about your friend. Stay safe and drink responsibly. Story 9. This was an interesting one in a survival situation, creating a solar sill to collect water in an emergency. What you need for this is a plastic sheet, pretty sure a garbage bag or plastic bag cut open will work, a rock, and a cup. Dig a funnel in the sand or a riverbed, placing the cup in the center. Around the cup and the funnel, either place vegetation if you have some around, unclean water, or if you have neither, you can even use pee. Next, cover the hole with the plastic sheet and place the rock on top directly over the cup. What will happen is, the sunlight will cause the moisture on the funnel to evaporate until it is trapped by the plastic, at which point the condensation will run down the sides until it reaches where the rock is and drops into the cup. All the impurities/bacteria will be left behind, leaving safe drinking water. Story 10. If you are on a sidewalk getting robbed/someone is with you, go into the street. Cars will just drive by usually even if they see someone in trouble. If you're in the street, you have a very small risk of being run over and a much higher likelihood of the attacker simply not following you into the street or someone actually going to help you. I had some guys follow me back from a bar in South Africa. I ran into the street and just dashed back home. They didn't bother chasing me, much easier for them to find another more unwitting victim. Story 11. Use the prongs of your car seat headrest to break the window if your car ever becomes submerged. I'd add to this that my driving instructor addressed all of us at once and impressed upon us the importance of keeping something sharp like a knife or pair of scissors in the car as well. She said that in the event that for whatever reason your seatbelt won't unbuckle, use that to cut yourself free if your car starts to fill with water. I've kept scissors in my door the whole time I've had a car and used them a lot more than I thought I would, but they're always gonna be there just in case I'll really need them. Story 12. If you're ever driving on slick roads and the rear end of your car begins to slide, turn your wheels to the direction that your car is skidding. Gently tap on the brakes to gradually slow the car down. Don't try to correct it. You'll just end up losing more control and probably end up crashing. You'll just have to wait until your car either corrects itself, stops on its own, or hits something once you've slowed down. It also depends on whether your car is front-wheel drive or rear-wheel. This is the only reason I will ever tell people to go drift in snow and empty parking lots. It helps to know how your specific vehicle reacts while sliding and keeps the driver from making valuable mistakes. Story 13. If you ever have chest pain, jaw pain, and/or left arm pain that isn't going away no matter what you do, call 911. Do not drive yourself to the ER. Don't even have a family member drive you. Call 911. An ambulance will alert the hospital in advance to prepare for your arrival. They can give you oxygen and medications and monitor your vital signs. They will not get lost on the way. They know right where the ER is. If you're having a heart attack, God forbid you go into a dangerous heart rhythm and die behind the wheel and crash into someone else. God forbid someone is driving you to the hospital and gets lost and wastes precious time. Story 14. Carry pepper spray. Cans only last for about 10 seconds, so use the spray in about 2 to 3 second intervals. That way, if your attacker turns or doesn't get hit well enough, you have more for multiple rounds. Try your best to determine which direction the wind is coming from. Spray is more of a cloud, and gel is more of a stream. You'll need better aim, but less likely to get yourself. Keep 3 or more. 1 in your car, 1 on your person, and 1 or more in your house. Buy new ones every year, and use the old ones to practice aiming with. In a legal sense, it's much easier to justify using pepper spray over a self-defense tool, a knife, or especially a gun. Story 15. Doesn't matter how well you can swim, don't underestimate water. It can kill, it does kill. Out in the middle of a lake/ocean and your boat starts taking on water? Didn't hit anything? It's quite possible your cooling line came off/got a hole in it, which means the faster you go, the more water will be pumped into your vessel. Just calm down and try to do some investigation before reacting. These lines break and should be replaced like every 10 years or so. Asterisk, I might be wrong on the date there, asterisk, of course. It could be something else, and slowing down might hurt you, so a little investigation goes a long way. If it is the cooling line keeping the engine turned on is what's sinking you, inboard motors only. A family member works in the rescue field and have come across a couple of these, but people not knowing enough about it and ended up sinking their boats. Also, the wrong sized life jacket can kill. Oh, we will put an adult on the child to make sure he's safe, as there's not enough will kill that child, as they won't float right and will end up drowning because of it. Not as good as some I've read. What's something your therapist said that was life-changing? Before we start with the first story, please hit subscribe and ring the notification bell to stay updated with us. Story 1. Not every friend has to be a close friend. You're able to have different kinds of friends, like levels of how close they are or how much you confide in them. I struggle with being a loner, and it affected my mental health a lot because I could count my friends on one hand. I thought of people as acquaintances or close friends with no gray area. This advice helped me appreciate more of the people who I'm not super close with, but they still have a presence in my life. Story 2. Just because the mentally ill person screaming at you lives in your home instead of on the streets doesn't mean their opinion is any more true. The fact that the relationships you have with some people are involuntary doesn't mean you should hold them to a lower standard than voluntary relationships. You can hold them to a higher standard. The mentally ill person screaming at me doesn't just live in my home, it lives in my head, and I always have to remind myself that what they are saying isn't true. Story 3. I used to have a lot of trouble staying asleep and a lot of anxiety about getting up for work. I'd wake up 4 to 5 hours before my alarm and lay there anxiously thinking now I only have X amount of hours left to sleep before I have to wake up. And I would just lay there counting down until I had to wake up, rather than sleeping. My therapist asked me if I was functioning just fine during the day, even with 4 to 5 hours of actual sleep. I said yes, I actually function pretty normally and don't really find myself tired. She looked at me and said, "Have you ever considered maybe you don't need 8 hours of sleep?" I was floored. It had not occurred to me at all. So, that night, I set my alarm and went to sleep 5 hours before I had to get up. Slept like a rock until my alarm went off, no anxiety. Rather than forcing myself to try and sleep to try to get a full 8 hours, I just go to sleep when I'm tired. Story 4. My therapist refers to anxiety as my firefighters trying to keep me safe. ETA, I'm seeing some of your great comments. It was a much bigger conversation than the statement about. The full analogy was the firefighters are trying to put out all of the fires, but either those fires aren't true fires, or the way they are trying to put them out isn't working as well anymore. I just like the visual aspect of these mini firefighters as I try to approach my issues in a more mentally healthy way. Story 5. As a teen in therapy, I used to call myself a potato because of my ugly appearance. The woman I had sessions with actually gave me a small plastic potato replica and had written on it in Sharpest, "Some people like potatoes." I think it was just the effort she went to trying to help me / cheer me up that really affected me and my judgment of professional help. I was an angsty kid, and after that I took getting help much more seriously. And a comment like that would have turned me around to embrace being a potato. People love potatoes, and potatoes can be turned into so many things. Vodka, fries, tater tots, chips. You can try on all these versions of yourself and see which one you like best. They are all potatoes, but they are living their favorite self. Story 6. Some people are like a colander. It doesn't matter how much time, love, and support you pour into them, it will never fill them up enough to make a difference. I once heard a similar expression about some people not being able to metabolize attention, or affection, or etc., which is why they will always feel ignored or insecure no matter how much you give them. And it really helped me let go of feeling like it was my responsibility to convince them that I cared. Story 7. Your anxiety doesn't deserve to be ignored, as well as it doesn't deserve to be justified. You can't tell yourself it'll be fine all the time while anxious. That's invalidating your feelings and burying them deeper. You need to tell yourself maybe this will happen and maybe it won't, because that's what reality is. Life is full of uncertainty, and we need to find ways to accept it, or else you'll drive yourself insane. Feelings are always valid, but not always justified. This helped me a lot as well. I realized the feelings are what they are, and I have every right to those feelings, but it also encourages you to examine why you have those feelings. Sometimes it ends up being justified, but not always. Story 8. That being a highly sensitive person is just how I'm built. It's not something that's wrong with me or something that I necessarily have to change. I just have to accept it, to learn my boundaries and needs and live accordingly. She said to think of violets and sunflowers. Both flowers, but they are different. They require different things. Violets can't be transplanted and can be more easily damaged, but they're beautiful. Sunflowers can be beat up and moved around. They're resilient. One is not necessarily better than the other. They just are. I love my therapist. My therapist said it's okay if you're sensitive. In this society, we have been conditioned to not let things get to you. Even acknowledging when someone hurts my feelings to myself, I go, "Oh, that makes sense, you're sensitive, love you, baby girl." Story 9. You don't need to please everyone all of the time. People who love you will not leave you because you disagree with them or do something they don't like. She nailed a lot of my behaviors back to the fact my biological dad left when I was 9 months old. I cannot cope with perceived abandonment and will do everything in my power to keep people happy because they might leave me. This is a big one for me that I'm still struggling with, even though I know it's true. My dad is my only living parent, and he stopped liking me as I got older and started disagreeing with him about some things and having my own personality. So I feel like I lost him because he liked me better as a kid. It's pretty crazy that I can have disagreements with my husband's family and it only makes the relationship stronger. Like I don't get it and I don't trust it. Story 10. After going to couples counseling therapy for 6 months, one day the ex didn't show up. Ex, an abusive alcoholic who would get physically and verbally abusive. Therapist looked at me and said, "You do know he's never going to change?" For some reason that made me realize I need to move on. That was the 3rd time I filed for divorce from him. Soon after he remarried and divorced, he continued to hit rock bottom, but has not changed. Fired for drinking on the job, vehicle repossessed, and now lives with his parents at the age of 60. Some people never change. Story 11. A dramatic family member called my husband a horrible person, emphasis on the horrible, loudly at an auction because my husband won the bid on a family heirloom that others wanted. My husband genuinely laughed very hard because he knew how absurd this insult was. I personally would have been very embarrassed. Months later, my brother, his spouse, and all of our kids got t-shirts printed that said my husband was a horrible person as a surprise for my husband's birthday. We even got my husband his own that said, "I'm a horrible person," and we all wore them on the boardwalk at the beach together in celebration of my husband's birthday. It was one of the most funny and memorable birthdays for all of us. People would comment as walking by, "He doesn't seem horrible," or even ask, "What did he do to be horrible?" It really taught me and our kids how such insults are meaningless if we choose to put them in perspective. If my mean-spirited relative had any idea how much fun we had over his insult, I am sure he would have wished he never would have said it. Story 12. I have hypochondria and OCD that tends to flare up during times of great stress or when I feel out of control. It has sort of blossomed into another type of anxiety where I feel like I need to constantly be preparing for the worst and just hoping to God for the best. I tend to majorly panic and overreact about what are likely always fixable problems and assume they are catastrophic. One of the most powerful things I've ever been told didn't come from a therapist, but from a friend back when I was in 8th grade. She said to me, "The world will not end. It will still turn." That's it. She said it as casually as one might insincerely ask, "How's it going?" to a passing stranger, but it was like an eye-opening moment, and I think of those words often when my anxiety gets intense, when my OCD ramps up, when I feel out of control or panic about what-ifs. It was a comforting thought. It reminds that life will go on, that this will not be the end of my world, this will not destroy me. If whatever I'm afraid of happening actually happens, I will make it through because the world will not end, the world will still turn. I will wake up to see another day, some way, somehow. I will come out the other side. It's a simple thing to have said, but it really helps calm me down sometimes. Story 13. You aren't that interesting. I would have panic attacks and paranoia that people were out to get me, PTSD, etc., and would think that people were judging me in grocery stores because my toddler was crying or that my hair was messy. And honestly, it boiled down to nobody cares. We're all trying to survive and get through the day, and what someone looks like or does, we observe and move on. Nobody is that interesting. Nobody, for the most part, is going to remember the toddler crying for a brief moment or the way I was dressed or if my makeup was perfect. Nobody. The only person who will remember is me and how I made myself feel. Story 14. The answer is simple. That doesn't mean it's easy, but it's simple. I was doing what I always do in difficult, scary situations that I don't want to deal with head on. I was overthinking and overcomplicating what I needed to do to be happy again. The answer was actually quite simple. I needed to tell my now ex-husband that I wanted a divorce. This statement just made it all clear to me. I was scared, so I was searching for a solution that would assuage that fear. But the truth was, there was no solution that wouldn't make this less difficult. The answer was simple, but it was okay to find it scary and difficult. Story 15. It was pointed out to me that I am amazing in crisis situations. but struggle immensely in situations that are just mildly uncomfortable or unpleasant to the point where I will have what was lovingly referred to as a hissy fit. So much so that I was first a critical care nurse and now a psychiatric NP. I am great at managing a crisis. It is where I thrive. But put me into a situation where I have to tolerate some mild discomfort? No thank you. Having this pointed out to me was life-changing. I have really been working on my mental toughness and my ability to tolerate situations that are mildly unpleasant but certainly aren't going to kill me. People like athletes and soldiers amaze me. They have a very high tolerance for mild, moderate discomfort and this uncanny ability to almost just tune out unpleasantness and keep going in the face of discomfort. AKA, they are very mentally tough. They don't need that adrenaline that comes from a crisis to thrive. That is now what I am working on improving in myself. I have made great strides, but won't lie. I do still find myself becoming cranky and overly dramatic at times in situations that are mildly unpleasant or inconvenient, and need to remind myself to dial it down a bit and draw on my inner mental toughness and tell myself that no one has ever died from being mildly inconvenienced. What's the biggest 180 you've seen a person's life take? Before we start with the first story, please hit subscribe and ring the notification bell to stay updated with us. Story 1. My niece went from being a meth-addicted felon who couldn't take care of her kids and bouncing in and out of jail to a respectable, reliable member of society. There was no fanfare. She just quietly went about changing her life. Most of us had just sort of written her off as a lost cause. My sister, her mother, had actually assumed legal custody of her kids. And she just changed. She did what she needed to do to get her life back on track. It took a while, but it's one of the most amazing and remarkable turnarounds I have ever seen. Story 2. I once knew a guy who was super shy and never went out, but then he started doing stand-up comedy and now he's performing all over the place. It's wild how much he changed. As someone who has both crippling social anxiety and a natural stage presence, the dichotomy is a weird one. Put me on stage in front of 1,000 people, and I have no problems. Easy peasy. Put me in a room of 50 strangers and tell me to mingle and make friends? I panic and start looking for my escape. Story 3. My brother's friend grew up with a pretty rough home life. As a result, he spent a lot of time at my house and he more or less became an additional sibling and child in our house. My parents even offered to let him live with us after he graduated high school. Fortunately for him, he was able to get a full ride to a prestigious university and made friends with a bunch of rich guys there who let him live in their nice shared rental and would often gift him experiences or gently used really nice things. He graduated with honors and made 6 figures out of college. He's since gotten married and made a life for himself in our hometown. I don't know how much contact he has with his family, but he's still close to mine. Story 4. Reminds me of a friend of mine from high school. He wasn't rich, but was a really good kid from a decent family. Smart, quiet, well-liked, totally against any vices, didn't smoke weed or drink with us, and we all respected that. He was also a great athlete. When we graduated, he got a scholarship to play college basketball. I was proud of him. Fast forward a couple years, I see on Facebook he's a struggling heroin addict on probation for various property crimes. During the summer after high school, he fell into destructive habits. Instead of going to college, he sold drugs and worked under the table at a smoke shop to feed his addiction. Fast forward to this year, and I find out from an old classmate that he passed away of an OD long ago. His family never published an obituary, no announcement on social media. Very sad. Story 5. One of my coworkers had a friend who won about $1,500 the first time he went to the new casino here. The problem was that he owed a lot more than that in unpaid taxes, which according to state law the state can garnish from casino winnings. He got mad and assaulted some casino staff and security. And one night dude went from no felonies to more than no felonies. Edit, he did go to prison. The casino made sure each and every one of their staff he assaulted told the prosecutor that they wanted him charged and that they would be available to testify against him. so he ended up getting multiple assault charges for one incident. Story 6. My brother spent his late teens and mid-20s being a lying, thieving, directionless bum who flunked out of college despite being extremely bright. Then one day he just decided enough was enough, a switch flipped in his brain or something, and he went back to school for electrical engineering, graduated one of the top of his class, and has a stable, well-paying career. And his relationship with the family has never been better. I couldn't be more proud of him. Story 7. A friend of mine. Good kid if a bit rambunctious and a bit of a troublemaker. Definitely on the track to a solid living as he could fix anything and was always keeping himself busy tinkering with things. Not book smart, but definitely not someone who would struggle to survive if left to his own devices. He was in an accident that left him with a severe TBI among other things. Long story short, he ended up hooked on drugs and was in and out of rehabs and constantly getting into trouble. Good news though, as he pulled another 180 out of his ass and is now clean for years, has a family, and though still dumber than a box of rocks, is living the good life. I'm proud of that moron through and through. Story 8. I can only speak for myself. I was 13 years old, overweight, sick all the time, prone to violent outbursts, mimicking my biological father, and actively researching the most painless and foolproof methods for ending my life. I started running. At first, I could only make it a couple of 100 feet. My ankles felt like they burst into flames. But I leaned into the pain because it felt like something other than despair. I kept running. Within a year, I was fit, swore off violence, and found several compelling reasons to live. And I got hopped up on bananas and Diet Coke and ran 13 miles one afternoon like it was nothing. I've fallen back into the pit several times in my life, but I always claw my way out toward the light. Running has always been the fulcrum. I'd be dead without it. Story 9. I knew a friend who was a quiet librarian who spent her days surrounded by books and her evenings alone at home. She decided to join a local improv group just to try something new, and within a few months discovered a natural talent for comedy that ignited a passion she never knew she had. Fast forward 2 years, and she had quit her job, moved to LA, and landed a spot as a writer on a popular comedy show. Story 10. I gave up drinking, began daily meditation, 45-minute workouts, therapy, AA, regular sleep schedules, good nutrition, and to-do lists every day. Changed from being a gloomy alcoholic recluse to a productive, albeit slightly melancholy, member of society. People have asked for help and made comments on how different I seem. It requires a great deal of effort and, more crucially, constancy. Furthermore, change is a gradual process. People seek out fast fixes. Achieving goals and making progress is incredibly satisfying. I started running 6 months ago, and I finished a 5K with almost 3,000 runners in the top 8%. Having done all of this, it is evident that I am not a complete moron. If there is no change, nothing happens. Story 11. Dear friend used to be a self-centered banker crypto bro with vile views on women. He was wealthy at a young age and even had an actual, honest-to-God marriage of convenience/trophy wife. He was driving alone on a rural road in the holidays and had a car accident where it flipped. He got some head trauma from that, but also the heat in the car went on and out of control. So, it turned into a heat stroke that became an actual stroke. Took him 3 months to get out of a coma. He wasn't good at math anymore and had a soft and friendly personality. Like, unusually so, for him. He also immediately demanded to be given drawing supplies. He didn't have a lot of memories of before and still doesn't. He's not rich anymore, is a professional artist now, and him and his trophy wife fell in love for real. He's extremely happy. He threw out all of his business suits, wears exclusively Hawaiian shirts, has a bunch of dogs, is bisexual, and makes erotic ceramics. Story 12. One of the most impactful changes I've seen in a person was a woman who worked as an executive at a large company, following what many consider the ideal path to success. She had spent years advancing in her career, earning an enviable salary and holding a high responsibility position. But one day, out of nowhere, she decided to leave it all behind. What was impressive wasn't just her decision to quit, but that instead of seeking a similar job or following what would be considered normal, she chose to move to a small seaside town and take up pottery. The interesting part is that she had never worked with her hands before, but something inside her pushed her to seek a simpler, more creative life. Over time, she improved her craft, and slowly, her work started to gain recognition. Today, she has her own studio, sells her pieces internationally, and says she's never felt more at peace with herself. The most inspiring part of this story isn't just the shift from a monotonous corporate life to one filled with artistic passion, but that she truly leapt into the unknown without a clear plan, and found a life full of peace and fulfillment because of it. Story 13. My ex-best friend was the kindest soul. She was literally the epitome of a perfect person. Anytime I needed a shoulder to cry on, she'd be there. Last August she met a boy. They moved in a month or so later, and ever since she's been with that boy, she's been really nasty. Completely flipped. I caught her talking bad about me, saying things about my looks and my relationship. It really hurt. She also gossiped a lot and never had a nice thing to say about anybody. She also turned very toxic and complained that I wasn't doing enough with her when I would see her at least every single week, despite the fact that she'd cancel plans to be with her BF, who she lived with. I made the difficult decision to cut her off completely in February. I have to admit, life's been peaceful since then. But I miss the old her like crazy. I think about her and what she's getting up to all the time. However, in her story, I'm the devil and the crap on the ground for cutting her off. I still cry over our friendship, and I miss the old her more than she'll know. Story 14. Back in March I had one job, lived in a nice neighborhood, and had few cares in the world. Fast forward to April 24, my mom passes away, making me the sole financial caretaker for my dad with dementia. His care is $9,000 per month out of pocket entirely. I now have 2 feet remote jobs and some side hustles that, without disclosing too much, could potentially get me in serious trouble, but I don't have much of a choice if I have to come up with an extra $9,000 every month. I moved to a bug-infested apartment in a terrible part of town to save as much money as possible. In the span of a few months, my life went from easy street to something resembling a crap Breaking Bad knockoff. Story 15. My best friend, Matt. He owned a home, had 2 dogs he adored and cared for, and had a successful job. He decided to try meth one day in 2022, and it derailed his life. He lost both dogs. They have since been adopted and are well, set his house on fire, lost his job and his car, and refused help. He developed paranoia and distrusted family and friends who tried to help him. He passed away in January 2024 after taking his life, and I still have a hard time accepting that it turned out the way it did. He was one of the smartest people I knew and a great friend. How did you turn your life around? Before we start with the first story, please hit subscribe and ring the notification bell to stay updated with us. Story 1. Stop caring about things I can't control and put all my energy into the things I can. It sounds hard, but there's actually a lot you can control, and that doesn't leave much room for the other crap. This has been the big thing for me this year. I'm really learning to go to the flow and just accept things which I can't control. Any change to plan used to always stress me out a lot, and I'm so much happier now. I'm just being more flexible. Any plan changes, and it's a big part of self-development to learn to deal with change. Story 2. When I was a teenager, I was homeless. A lot of places wouldn't hire me because I had no experience or interview clothes. I went to the Board of Education and begged the HR lady to give me a chance at any job. I told her I'd scrub the school with a toothbrush if they paid me. They made me a general sub for clerical. I took a call for one of the bad neighborhood schools that some others turned down. Walked across town to get there every day. I had to start walking at 4:30 a.m. to be on time. I wore dress clothes from a church mission that were way too big, but I did my best. After 4 months, they gave me a long-term position, then a permanent one with benefits. I saved up enough for an apartment, Finding a landlord okay with renting to an 18-year-old homeless girl was hard, and started college. I haven't been homeless a day since in the last 15 years. I even have a house now. Story 3. Decided it's okay to put yourself first no matter what. I don't mean that go ahead and cheat and lie for your benefits. For example, I was seeing this toxic person for some time, and I was the one always compromising and making efforts. When things finally ended, I chose to cut off all contact from that person while they wanted to remain in touch for support or validation. I felt bad and selfish while doing it, but starting to feel better about myself now that that person is out of my life. You need to be selfish if the other person is being selfish too. Story 4. Went from just partying hard on the weekends to partying hard every day to losing my job from partying hard. Drug test failed for coke. From there it turned to meth. Really low point. One day, I had an epiphany and realized that it wasn't one I wanted, and that I've seen people go down similar paths. Actively seeked help, changed friend groups, stayed in, got clean, and am now doing okay. Can't say I'm doing great, but my future is looking better every day, even if it's only slightly. The addiction is still affecting me, even after all this time. It's caused insomnia and depression, along with anxiety. Things I didn't have before doing coke/meth. Story 5. Forced myself to become a couch surfing loser in order to reset myself. I was in my 20s with no job and no school, just bumming at my mom's place and drinking away any cash I could get my hands on while playing video games 24/7. Mom loves me unconditionally, which is good, but it basically enabled me because she would never throw me out. I realized I was a loser and kicked myself out to become homeless, but not really, and bummed at my buddies' places until I could get a job and a place to live. Now I not only have a well-paying job and a nice enough place, but a wife I love and 2 cats, and I haven't hit 30 yet. I just needed to feel the hunger to realize I wanted more. Story 6. Lived in Detroit. Skies are gray. Got laid off because management made an absolute mess out of the merger. Next door neighbor passed away. Decided the city will be the death of me and my happiness, too. Sold the house. Bought a van. Moved to LA. Went to school. Now I am doing some of the coolest crap imaginable. A number of publications. Trips to the jungle. Exploring uncharted caves. Meeting celebs. Jumping out of airplanes. Presenting at academic conferences. Now trying to get into a Ph.D. program in archaeology. That's it in a nutshell. Story 7. My old school was absolute crap. My teachers were incompetent and were fueling my mental health issues rather than helping me with them. Ran away from home after a fight with my mom. Lived in a governmental institution for kids and teenagers for 6 months and changed schools. I'm a student of a Christian private school now, not Catholic though. Sounds worse than it is, and I finished therapy. My teachers here really care about their students and want them to be good and happy. Changed my grades from an average of 4.4, and Germany 1 is the best and 5 to 6 is the worst, to a 2.0, and am back at home with my mom. Never been happier in my life. Story 8. Leaving Tumblr. I had been brainwashed into one of the most insufferable people. Boycotting everything, tirades about inequality regardless of the appropriateness. The hive mind mentality was making me a bad person who thought I was always right and just. I'm happier now that I got out of there and people actually like being around me. I have friends again. Most importantly though, I'm enjoying the world without constantly spitting venom at anything that isn't the perfect utopia project. Story 9. Quit my job. In 2010, my job moved to a different city, and I had to follow because the money was good, or so I thought. 12-hour swing shifts with 90-minute ride each way. Town was a total crap hole. Rents were crazy expensive if you didn't want to live in the hood. Ended up working for Net Zero after bills and expenses, child support, living in an apartment with no furniture. After 2 years, I had enough. Learned to day trade, put my savings into it, doubled it, In a bull market, everyone's a genius. Now that my kids are out of college, my bills are absurdly low. Learned to live cheap. Inherited a house, sold it. Now my investments are under professional management. Drove a forklift for a while, cool gig. Story 10. Was always chubby while growing up. I have been yo-yo dieting for almost a decade. It eventually got to the point where dieting wasn't effective. I couldn't lose the weight and wasn't even eating much. I decided enough was enough and I was going to beat that eating addiction. I remember walking into the kitchen being fed up with the scale, the food, my body. I thought to myself, this is absurd. I'm not eating much yet I still can't lose. I'm done with this crap. I stubborned up. Cut the junk food, the snacks, and the irregular eating. Within 2 weeks, my body caught up. It's been 2 years since, and I am proud to say that I'm actually in love with the way I look. And I don't even look perfect. But I'm content. I am no longer addicted to food and do eat intuitively. It's not just the food addiction though. As soon as I got that under control, every other aspect of my life has improved significantly. I just feel happier overall. Story 11. I grew up in South Florida during the beginning of the opioid craziness. From 2006 to 2011, things got pretty bad. I'm 2011, I sold my last possession, my car, for $800, packed 2 suitcases, and bought a bus ticket to Denver. Never been to Denver, didn't know anyone there, but weed was starting to be legal and I didn't want to miss out. I detoxed on the bus going from Florida to Colorado. Do not recommend. I got lucky and ended up sitting next to a guy that was a grower and needed help in his garden. I didn't know it at the time, but on the Greyhound he said I had an 8-hour job interview. Got to Denver and he really helped me get established. Within 2 months I was sleeping on his couch and learning how to grow. Haven't touched a painkiller since I got on that bus almost 9.5 years ago, and now I'm married, homeowner, decent car, and working my dream job in the cannabis industry. It's not for everyone, but I literally went from homeless sticking needles in my arm to living a life better than I could have ever imagined. Story 12. I realized that I needed control of my life. I was on a bad path to life in jail and was listening to a bad crowd. Jail or death were the paths in front of me. One day while cleaning dishes, it dawned on me that I had more worth. I could do better than that. I now run tow truck and love it. I get to help people and make smiles happen on so many faces it's not even funny. I give them a little knowledge along the way, Cass, I know a thing or two. But tell them to take it with a grain of salt, as I'm not a mechanic, but it's a start to what may save them money. Story 13. I was doing nothing with my life at 23 years old. One day I hadn't eaten for over 18 hours, and before I even realized what was happening, my body had already gone into the process of rejecting whatever food I tried to eat. I was nearly dying on my couch screaming in pain, and I promised myself that I'm going to get my life together from that moment on. An ambulance was called. I spent the night in the hospital struggling to eat a sandwich, and within the next week I had registered for classes at an adult education school to get the last of my high school credits so that I could go to college. I did everything I promised myself I would, and in September of 2014 I started college. Now I'm $12,000 in debt, working an enjoyable, well-paying full-time job I didn't even need to go to college for, that isn't even remotely related to my college program. Oh, and I'm laid off from work. Story 14. Career change at age 28. Took 10 years of part-time study and working multiple jobs and volunteering. Not easy, but totally doable for anyone. The stress of the career change did actually make me unwell when I began to run out of steam and suffer from burnout. Almost lost it all. Under advice of doctor, I found a hobby for me. That hobby was Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. This saved me. So in short, a career change and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu are things that truly turned my life around. Story 15. I had dropped out of uni because of depression. I was in a customer service job I hated. I was in a relationship with someone who treated me poorly. I had a couple of suicide attempts under my belt. I sofa surfed and drank a lot. My boyfriend and friends told me there was no point in going back to uni, and I believed them. Then I met a stranger who I talked to about books. He told me that he couldn't believe I'd dropped out of uni because I was obviously passionate. The next morning, I packed my stuff and left my boyfriend, then reapplied for uni nearly 10 years later. I'm a qualified teacher, I love my job, and I own a house. I also married that stranger. What would instantly destroy your life just by doing it once? Before we start with the first story, please hit subscribe and ring the notification bell to stay updated with us. Story 1. Foraging and picking mushrooms you cannot identify. My aunt had neighbors who used to go camping and forage for mushrooms. On one of those trips, they made a stew with some mushrooms they had found. The entire family, 2 adults and 3 kids, died from eating that stew. My aunt wouldn't even eat store-bought mushrooms after that. Story 2. As an older guy in the trades, screw around with safety. I've seen enough people mess their livelihood up by taking a stupid, unnecessary chance. It's always a shame when you hear of a young tradesperson die because you know they probably don't know better or didn't work with people who were teaching them how to do it safely. Number 1 rule is come home at the end of each day. Story 3. When I was an apprentice, the hardest thing was standing up to people who were in the trade for plus 15 years who asked you to do blatantly unsafe work. I was nearly fired off a job for not going into a confined space that was 10 feet below ground, with the work area being several hundred feet away. There were no air monitors and the radio relay was dead, so 200 feet and you'd lose communication. The best part was our staging area was less than 15 minutes away where they had charged air monitors and relays. Luckily, the safety officer just happened to stop by that morning and saw the foreman in my face. Apparently, I was the reason no one else would go down to work. The safety guy made it a point to stop by our site first every morning. Unfortunately, I was moved to the worst job on the site, but I felt better knowing the people in the confined space had working equipment. Story 4. I'm a journeyman tradesperson, and that's one thing I've noticed about a lot of the younger kids in trades. They just don't realize that the safety rules are literally written in someone else's blood. The rules aren't made willy-nilly because somebody thought that we needed to do this. It's because somebody got seriously hurt or killed, and now we have to do this to prevent that from happening to the next person. One of our yard's men used to work at a wellfield company. They were doing welding on a containment tank, and the welder didn't use his gas monitor to test the tank before working on it. 5 people died when it exploded. Our yardman was about 100 m back from the blast and has severe burn scars on his face, partial blindness in his right eye, and a lot of very serious scars from where tank shrapnel hit him. Safety is no joke. Story 5. I'm a custodian at a middle school. We had a leak in a roof and needed to get into a cupboard that was near the ceiling to clean up the water and put a bucket up to catch the leak. I said, "I'll go grab the ladder," and went to do just that. When I came back, my coworker was sitting on the ground holding his foot, and the teacher was calling the office. The chair he was standing on was on its side and in the middle of the room. He broke his ankle, got reprimanded, and had to take a bunch of safety classes over. And I had to clean up the mess by myself and cover the rest of his shift. Not the point, but irritating nonetheless. Story 6. Jumping into an unknown body of water head first. Seen it happen where some idiot jumps in head first and paralyzes himself. Sad, but it happens in less than 5 seconds. This nearly happened to me about 10 years ago. I was at a lake in Minnesota with a former partner at her family's property, and there were 2 docks you could hang out on. One was too shallow to dive, but the other was fine. Stupid me was hanging out and drinking and totally forgot I was on the shallow dock, dove head first, and totally hit my face on the lake bottom. Felt a crunch in my neck as well. I'm very fortunate. All that happened was I bruised up my forehead a bit. I think about that moment often. Story 7. Road rage. Guy I went to middle school jumped out of his car and beat a guy he was road raging with so badly that he was partially paralyzed by the end of it. Guy was 19 and got a 45-year prison sentence. Completely messed his whole life up and will only have a few years in the outside, and that's if he's lucky and lives that long. One moment of anger leading to a lifetime of regret. Drivers need to understand if they are being attacked by someone in a road rage or otherwise, your car is a deadly weapon. If you are threatening me with your fist/knife/gun or whatever weapon you have on you, I will run you over in order to get away from you. And if this matter is ever brought to court, I can easily claim self-defense. Story 8. Hitting someone while driving drunk or half drunk or having any alcohol in the blood actually. When I was younger, I didn't really care as long as I didn't pass the limit. So, I drank 2 beers and went on in my car. One night, I was driving on an 80 km/h road, somewhere in the Campaign, with no pavement and quite far from any cities or villages. So, I was careless. At some point, I passed a person walking on the side of the road, no lights on them or whatever. Nothing at all. I saw them the moment I passed them. Thankfully, nothing happened, but I didn't have a lot of room when I passed. Since I was quite careless on a road where there's very little traffic, I was almost driving in the middle of the road. Story 9. Fentanyl. I have seen scary documentaries on this. I watched it cause I am prescribed fentanyl patches for my chronic pain. I'm in the UK, so I don't know if it's different in the US, and they are strict about controlled drugs due to the opioid crisis. But it's the only drug that means I'm independent and mobile and manages my pain. Without it, I become disabled and highly in need of care. But I would imagine if I tried street fentanyl, I'd become addicted. Story 10. Letting my baby dog off his leash. He ran out while I was leaving work. It was around 9 p.m. on Super Bowl. Car hit him and dragged him 20 feet. Never stopped. He was still alive but died after 2 minutes. I feel miserable beyond words every single day. I don't even care about being traumatized watching it. I just care about the fact that my sonny boy is gone. He was my very first dog. At 4 years old, I lost him, and it was entirely my fault. I was always lax with him and would let him run off leash at night when the office area was quiet. It wasn't his fault he ran out that night. It was mine for letting him do it previously. Biggest price I'll ever have to pay. Story 11. I knew a guy who was driving him and his wife home late at night from a wedding. She put her car seat back so she could sleep in the car. He reached across and unbuckled her seatbelt because it looked uncomfortable as she was sleeping. A few minutes later, he swerved to avoid a kangaroo that jumped out onto the highway, lost control of the car, and hit a tree. His wife would have survived if she'd still had her belt on, but since he'd unbuckled it, she flew out the front window and into the tree at about 110 km/h. He tried to be kind and it killed her. The only mercy is that it was likely near instantaneous, so she didn't suffer. But he was tormented by that one moment/decision for the rest of his life. Story 12. I was working for a food distribution company driving down Highway 35 towards Laredo, Texas 3 a.m. in the morning. When heading towards an overpass, I see some people on the side parked, not thinking much of it. Next thing I know, they tossed a body over the side of the overpass. I remember it till this day like it was yesterday with the timing I hit the person mid-air. I remember seeing legs right over the edge of the hood of my truck, then running him over and feeling my tractor and trailer going over him. I stopped a ways down just cause of shock and fear of whoever dumped the body. I didn't go and look cause I knew I wouldn't be able to handle what I would have saw. Police got called, and so did my company. They never found out who eliminated the guy, and after that I couldn't drive for months after it. Any speed bump or pot would trigger the memory instantly, but 7 years later, I'm still a truck driver. Story 13. Slapping or just hitting someone out of anger. I hate to admit it. I'd like to say that I usually have a calm mind and body until I get disrespected, then I want to hit someone. I already know violence isn't the answer to everything, but it sure would be nice to be able to make someone know not to mess with you ever again. I was born in 1993, and I feel like I can't do much, even with the skills I've learned throughout my life. Thank you for reading, and I hope you have a wonderful day. Story 14. Cheating, and not just the cheater's life. My ex-husband cheated on me, and he lost me and our children. He seized them during summer break. He got the house, the dogs, 2 of the 3 cats, and the car. I lost everything except for the kids and my cat. I have to start over in Italy, living with my mom and sister in a 2-bedroom apartment and bringing all my belongings in suitcases while dragging my 2 kids and cat onto 3 flights while fighting tears. The kids lost the most, and now suddenly they have to learn a new language, go into a new school, start over and make new friends, and they don't get their own room anymore. They have to share with mom and Nana. Edit. To add, my ex also keeps begging me to come back to him because he realizes this and that, and while I'm tempted, I can't get hurt like that again. Story 15. Most kinds of manual labor without thinking about safety. Back about 10 years ago, my uncle, who had sold his farm but still wanted to work, was on a stepladder at his newish part-time job to finish loading produce onto a truck. He fell off the stepladder and broke his elbow when it hit the pavement. He's had constant elbow/arm pain since then that won't go away, even with a nerve block, TENS unit, etc. He's basically completely disabled because of it, and has even looked into getting his arm amputated to get rid of the pain. But supposedly there's a reasonable % chance that the pain would still be there as phantom pain. What life hacks have you personally found that improve your life? Before we start with the first story, please hit subscribe and ring the notification bell to stay updated with us. Story 1. Stretching. Fixing a general feeling of lousiness or discomfort is usually just as simple as stretching for a few minutes, I've found. People don't realize it, but sitting all the time actually makes your quads and lower back very tight. Leaning forward to look at a screen or looking down to look at a phone also really screws up the muscles in your neck. Everyone should be stretching and doing some range of motion exercises like yoga or Tai Chi. But most people also think this is stupid and they have zero interest in even trying it. Story 2. Train your dog. When I was a kid, my parents' definition of trained was screwing outside, a very low bar to meet. So as I got older, it turns out you can teach them to not jump up, charge through the door, pull on the leash, actually come when called, leave the room on command, get off the couch, even keep them off the couch when you aren't there, and hold still when you clip nails. A year or 2 worth of consistent training with positive reinforcement will give you a lifetime of stress-free pet ownership. Story 3. Cleaning a little bit every day. I say this with so much respect, and I keep my house very clean overall, but it is really hard to do this, and really easy to beat yourself up for not doing it. It makes perfect sense to spend 20 minutes cleaning each day after yourself, right? Then DUH. Your house will always be clean/presentable. Alas, there are times when it seems easier to summit Everest than to deal with the laundry you've been putting off. So to this I say the mental health life hack is to cut yourself some slack if you don't clean a little bit every day and instead appreciate doing what you can. Story 4. Okay, I'm going to put a relatively boring one. I got a tray. Not a fancy schmancy one, but one from a dollar store, but it's super sturdy, made from some kind of wood, and I literally use it every day. One trip up and down stairs safely transporting hot drinks for my so and I. It can carry multiple snack bowls. I can deliver food to the table faster when I have guests over. Afterwards, I can stack dirty dishes, and it's one trip to the kitchen sink. I can keep my drinks on it at my office table, and because it has sides if anything spills, it's contained on the tray and not on my table. I got another tray when I was fostering kittens, and it was one of the best tools for fostering. I can transport all the food dishes so no one is left behind during feeding time. I have all the meds and syringes and towels and wipes all ready and together on the tray when it was time to give meds. I highly recommend getting a tray, even a small one. Trays. Story 5. Cooking saves so much money. As he said, it's a lot cheaper. Also, oftentimes people choose unhealthy takeout food options, so you could say that maintaining good health motivates some people as well. For example, where I live, I can buy groceries for under €50 for a week of cooking for 3 people. I also grow a few things in the garden that I save money on. In comparison, just one takeout meal would cost €5+ per person for junk food options and even more for healthy dishes, and I eat 2 to 3 meals a day. That adds up to around €100+ a week. So I'm saving more than €50 a week just for food alone in my household. If you have a nice salary and money isn't a concern, then this won't motivate you much, but it works for me. Story 6. Control what info you give others. Say what you have to say concisely, then stop talking. If they have questions, they'll ask. Don't anticipate questions and answer them preemptively. Be prepared to answer those questions, but don't overplay. Doing and speaking more than necessary gives your opponent more to attack. Doing the bare minimum to finish the job well is a great principle. Minimalism is not laziness, it's being resourceful and careful. Story 7. Get yourself a drop spot at home, where you put your keys, sunglasses, mask, anything you need to have when you leave the house. And train yourself to use it. Whenever you're leaving the house, you only need to go to that spot to find everything you need. I have one of these, but my soul just cannot get into the habit of using it. I've had one ever since I moved out of home, and he's been living with me for 2.5 years now without it sticking, so I'm not sure it ever will. He's always losing his wallet and keys, but I always know exactly where mine are. If there's anything I need to take with me when I leave the house next, like a container I need to return to someone, or a list to take shopping, I try to put that down in the same place so I don't forget it. Story 8. Being honest with yourself. Years ago, when I first got my first job after college, I would just spend and not really worry about it. My accounts always had enough money. One day I made a budget and went, that isn't right, I should be saving more money than I am. Turns out, after checking CC statements, I was spending a lot more on booze and food than I realized. Same with dieting. I brought weight concerns up with my old doctor. He just brushed them off, gave some half-assed advice. My new doctor actually listened, asked what I had tried, then said get a calorie tracker and try to stick under the advised level and do this for a month. After 3 weeks, I'm down 10 pounds, feel better, and realize I suck at portioning. Story 9. I'm not a morning person. I do as much as possible for morning me, and it makes my entire day better. I set up the coffee maker and set the timer, put a bottle of water in the fridge, pack breakfast and lunch and a snack. I have an 11-hour day with commute, and set up the cat's food dishes and canned food so it's ready to go. I give them dry food and water at night before bed, so I don't have to worry about it in the morning. It's amazing how much better my day is just having done those small things. I also make nighttime meals before bed. When I get home from work, the kitchen is clean enough to make dinner right off the bat. Daytime me might earn the paycheck, but nighttime me is a boss. Story 10. Date yourself, as in take yourself on dates. You're the only person you'll spend every moment of the rest of your life with. It's worth developing your relationship with yourself. Treat yourself to nice evenings where you do nice things for yourself. Make yourself a steak dinner and eat by candlelight. Take yourself to that show you want to see. If you treat yourself like someone you love, you will love yourself. When you love yourself, your life will feel incredible every day. Story 11. If you wake up by alarm, get up when it goes off. Don't hit snooze. I know this goes against everything your body wants, but personally, it lets me get up, get centered, and prepare for my day. Snoozing is great, don't get me wrong, but you set that alarm for a reason, and not snoozing is following through with your commitment. It translates to following through on so many other things throughout the day. No alarms on your days off, and I hope you get some. If not, I'm sorry and I hope things get better for you soon. Story 12. If you are procrastinating something or having trouble focusing on a task, try counting down from a number. It can be any number really. I personally like 6, and you can try it in your head or out loud. When you get to 0, you might feel motivated to get back to the task. Doesn't work for everyone, but works for me. I also found that timing mundane and repetitive tasks really helps to put things into perspective. My big one was cleaning up and washing dishes after cooking and eating. It seemed like such a long, strenuous task, so I decided to time myself once. Putting food away, wiping down counters, and washing dishes takes me about 7 minutes. Never more than 10. Knowing that makes it so much easier to tell myself just get up, take the 5 to 10 minutes to clean up, it's not as bad as you think. Story 13. Keep things simple. You don't need to own a house full of random objects. Just as long as you have what you truly need to feel comfortable. The world is trying to sell you anything it can. Don't fall for it. Whenever someone is acting in a bad way, just ignore them and move on. You don't have any obligation to become as bad as them. Vengeance is a sweet poison. Anytime you leave a room, quickly look for one thing that doesn't belong there. Take it and throw it away or place it where it belongs. Your space will slowly get cleaner without any chore feeling. Story 14. When arguing, don't try to convince others to agree to your opinion. Instead, try to understand them. It will help you to see the key differences. You'll understand your values better, and they'll see why you truly think a certain way. Everyone has struggles. Some people are crap, but most of the time they're just in a bad mood because of a bad day / week / month / year / life. Be nice and kind. You can't change nor help everyone. You don't have to have an opinion on every subject. It's perfectly fine to say I don't know. Don't spread rumors / fake news, and keep an open mind. Be hungry for new knowledge. Story 15. You want to accomplish a big goal, like losing 50 pounds or writing a novel. Don't make the big goal your actual target. Divide it up into a series of smaller goals. Don't try to lose 50 pounds, try to lose 1 pound. When successful, do it again. And again. Don't try to write a novel. Just write a page. Then do it again. And again. You'll get there eventually if you develop the process, the habit. Otherwise, you'll stress about how far you still are away from the end goal and you'll more easily quit. What was the easiest money you've ever made in your life? Before we start with the first story, please hit subscribe and ring the notification bell to stay updated with us. Story 1. I used to freelance software development. I had a regular client who had a project that I was contributing to here and there. He's in the US, I'm in Ireland. One night, at 3 a.m., I woke up to go to the toilet and saw an email on my phone with urgent in the subject line. I read it and he said, "Man, if you can fix this one last bug, the project is complete. I'll send you whatever is left in the project budget if you can fix this in the next 2 hours." I grabbed my laptop on my bedside table. Saw the bug. Fixed a simple variable name. Closed my laptop and went to bed. All in all, it took 40 seconds. When I woke up, there was 5,500 pounds in my Stripe account. 5,500 pounds for less than 1 minute work is pretty good going. I wish they were all like that. Story 2. When I was in software, we had a long list of defects that needed fixing. They had several senior developers categorize them into small, medium, and large in terms of anticipated effort to fix. The managers assigned price tags to each category. I don't remember how much. Developers could then sign up to work them off hours. We were all salaried. It was just the expectation that you'd work on them on your own time. I picked up a large that was expected to take several days to a few weeks for like $800. Deleting a single database record took 60 to 90 seconds because it had about 5 layers of descendants, where the great-great-grandchild table had about 7,000 descended records of the topmost parent record. Story 3. Not me, but my son. When he was 10, my elderly neighbor lost her cat. He was gone for days and she was devastated. My son was at the bus stop a block away. I'm with him, but I'm chatting with other parents and not paying attention. Suddenly, he takes off running between the yards, and I'm like, WTF, so I take off after him. He runs down like 100 yards, and there's the missing cat. The cat seemed scared, but recognized us and let him pick her up. We walk up the street, bus is gone, and knock on our neighbor's door, and of course she breaks down in tears and offers him a reward, which he refuses. She knocks on our door later to thank him and again offers the reward, which he again refuses. Fast forward a few years when she passes away. We get a knock on the door from her son, who tells us his mother's will included a provision that $25,000 be placed in a 529 account for my son's education. Story 4. In the early 2000s, it was being an expert at Adobe software. People would pay me to do portions of their project because they never bothered to learn how to use Illustrator and do it themselves. Easy money. Charged hundreds to vectorize raster logos, which took a few clicks and maybe 30 seconds for me to do. Story 5. I had a cushy side gig teaching one of my day job clients Photoshop once a week for a few hours. He'd give me a stack of cash and tell me to tell him when I needed more. I made $50 per hour, and he was a nice older dude to work with. I actually spent most of the time restoring his old family photos, which I enjoyed doing anyway. It wasn't a windfall, but it was nice at that point in my life. Story 6. I started developing a snow route to earn money when I was 8 or 9. I never had a set price and always told people to pay what they thought it was worth. I always did a good job making sure to expose the edges of the grass and even carried a broom to make sure I got every bit of snow off of the walk/drive. I usually got $5 to $10, sometimes $20, sometimes less, and I was always happy just to get paid regardless. Then this older guy moved onto my street. The first time it snowed, I knocked on his door, and he said I could shovel his sidewalk and drive. When I was done, he came out and told me I did a great job and handed me $60, and he did every time it snowed except around Christmas. He gave me $100. One Christmas break, I made $500 just from him. Story 7. Worked for TSA for a while, including during peak COVID. Going from thousands of people a day to maybe 40. By far the easiest money I ever made. Loads were so low we set teams up and were doing 1 week on and 1 week off for a while, all paid. People complained about being bored. It was better than being cooped up in the house, and the commute was heavenly. Story 8. Temp work at a chemical company. They made all sorts of cleaning products. Clock in, then all of us drones had to grab an order form off the stack and get to work filling cans and buckets. 101-gallon buckets of ice-stain solvent, 255-gallon buckets of lung scorcher fluid, whatever. I soon discovered the golden ticket, their bubble bath gel. It shipped in 55-gallon drums, was thick and warm, and smelled like candy. Best of all, it was slow. I'd set up the empty barrels on pallets, insert the nozzle, and wait 30 minutes or so per barrel. We weren't allowed to leave a nozzle while a container was being filled. Kind of boring, but in a pleasant-smelling, easy money kind of way. I made sure to get to work first so that I could flip through the orders and get the good stuff. Story 9. I worked away doing night shifts in a car factory. I got paid my regular wages plus double time for the night shift hours and spent several months being put up in a hotel and having all my food and expenses paid. The actual work was checking a couple of brackets, and the rate the line moved meant that it took about 3 minutes, once every 2 hours, and there were 2 of us, so it rounded it to about 6 minutes work each per shift, and the rest of the night sat around with a book or a Game Boy. Story 10. This will sound counterintuitive, but my time in the Army was like that. Housing, food, medical attention, paid time off, work clothes, all provided for. My paycheck was just for me, and it was enough to rent an apartment off base and buy my own food and clothing. I was stationed in Germany and traveled around Europe, many times on base-supported trips. All bases had cafes and clubs with music and dancing. I was a PFC in 1976 till 1978, and it was great, one of the best experiences of my life. Story 11. I started a blog about 15 years ago about a topic that was interesting to me. It didn't get much traffic for about 4 to 5 years, then it took off. I estimate it's made a total of about $2 million in pre-tax profit since around 2015. My best year was $470,000. But here's the thing, a lot of the time it was mostly passive income. Don't get me wrong, I worked on it a lot, but I'd also go 3 to 6 months without touching it and it would still bring in $20,000 plus per month. Unfortunately, traffic tanked about a year ago, so the gravy train is probably over. Story 12. Got 120 of my currency, about $25, as a private ESL tutor for a rich kid that literally slept through my lesson, and a rich clubhouse owner who checked his Insta and watched stories like I wasn't there. Frustrating until I saw the money. Taught about 2 hours each. 120 before COVID was a cool sum of money that you could spend in an entire week. I don't remember how I spent it, but man, it was nice. Now 120 is a couple of days worth of groceries. Story 13. My parents lived on a 17-acre tract in North Raleigh. It was on the county tax rolls valued at $500,000. They had paid just $250,000 for it 10 years earlier, and my dad was convinced it was overvalued. He had appealed the value but lost. He called me one day to say that he was going to sell out. Some fool had offered him the same price as the tax value. I asked what the property had appraised for, and he said he didn't have it appraised. Anyone knew it was not worth the offer price. I offered that I would pay for an appraisal just to satisfy my curiosity. If the appraisal is higher, we can split the difference 50/50. We got the appraisal and it was double the offer. My dad said there's no way it would sell for that. I said, humor me, it costs nothing to find out. We just put a for sale sign in the front yard. I said let the process run out. It sold for more than the appraisal and I made $250,000. Story 14. Used to do electronics design consulting on the side. Got a call from a company I had done business with. Can you make a device which makes a precise IRC 2800 Hz tone and which fits inside a walkie-talkie? I said I don't know. Can you send me the walkie-talkie and the technical manual? They sent me the stuff and I studied the schematic. Very quickly, I realized one of the internal oscillators was something like 16,384 times 2,800 Hz. I could do this for less than $2. So I call them back and I say sure I can do it, but I can't make any money off this because it is so cheap. And they say we'll pay you $50 per unit. This is the remaining piece of a multi-million-dollar tender. I sold hundreds of these things. I even farmed out the manufacturing. I paid for my first house with them. Story 15. One year I went in for my annual review and to learn what / if the raise percentage would be for the next year. I am a seasoned employee and love my job, but I've done the same job for years. The raise is usually tiny, like 2% or so. I walked out with my first / only mini zeros bonus. They forgot to tell me the previous year I qualified for them when earned, literally had no idea. Second, super rich friend loved her kitties too much for regular cat sitters, so she paid me hundreds to pop in twice a day to feed and clean up after the darlings. We got along great and I love cats, so easy. People who are 25 and above, what's the harshest life lesson you've learned? Before we start with the first story, please hit subscribe and ring the notification bell to stay updated with us. Story 1. That life can take a loved one at any time, so cherish those you love, make time for family and friends, and tell people you love them often. My grandfather died the morning after the doctor agreed to discharge him from the ICU. I don't have a single picture with him. Never expressed how much I loved him. It seems I had so much to tell him and ask him. His death taught me to value people and express my affections more. It's difficult but a necessity. You never know when people you love would not be there anymore. Story 2. Your health can evaporate quickly, or it can turn out that all of the things you thought were just random stuff are actually symptoms of a medical condition you've always had. In my case, it turns out that subluxations aren't normal. Who knew? Not me until I was in my 20s. A quote that I try to live by when it comes to health. Tears of discipline are uncomfortable, but tears of regret are unbearable. Social drinking? Stop the weekend booze binge? Yep, completely stopped. Eating a heavy dinner thinking I can handle it for a day? Stopped. What I did pick up though are joining the 5 a.m. club. Working out the body, regulating breath through conscious breathing, and meditating for mental calmness and clarity. Story 3. You have to speak up for yourself. No one else will. Also, don't speak up for people who are too cowardly to do it for themselves. They still won't speak up and will likely throw you under the bus to protect themselves. Be your biggest advocate. You only can be your own worst enemy. No one thinks about you as much as you think they do. They can say crap about you and forget about you, so don't take it to heart and let them eat their own Weetabix. keep choosing you over and over again. Story 4. If your employer is doing something illegal or unethical and you decide to confront them about it, do it in a way that all communication will leave a paper trail. Biggest life lesson I've ever learned. I've had back pain for 8 years now. Don't ever expect employers to take care of you after a work injury. They destroyed my injury report and stupid me never kept a copy. Worst experience of my life. Story 5. Your friends from high school or college will disappear if you don't make the effort to stay in touch. People in general. I'm 38 and in different parts of my life I had friends and family alive that are no longer alive. You feel almost lonely when people that have made up certain memories are no longer there for y'all to retell it. You also just have life slowly separate people from you. Then you go through changes where some people just took different paths and you don't even recognize who they are anymore. You also cherish those moments that you get that make you feel young and alive again, or having people come back into your life and you didn't realize how much you missed them. Story 6. Do not lie to your significant other. Have hard conversations and trust them enough to be able to have them with you. Give them the chance and don't be afraid/avoid doing it in fear of rejection or judgment. I learned that one the hard way, unfortunately. Before the couple becomes exclusive, they should be asking each other the hard questions. Whatever phase people call it, whether dating or talking phase, ask the uncomfortable questions as you guys get to know each other. Knowing what I know now, I wouldn't want to become exclusive and introduce him to my friends and family without asking some hard questions. Their reaction, answer, and body language will tell you whether y'all can move forward to being exclusive or not. Because at least with that stage, if we go our separate ways, I don't have to endure the awkward questions from friends and family about him. Story 7. Communication is always key. If you have something on your mind, even if it's uncomfortable, talk about it. Because it's when you hold crap in and don't communicate with your partners that things normally implode. And also, don't do the opposite. Learn to have discussions and arguments that are constructive and stay away from personal attacks and resentment. Even the best relationships require work at some point. No matter how easy it is, you always have to put in time and effort if you want to be with someone. And that goes both ways. Don't waste your time on people who won't waste it on you. Story 8. No one is going to save you. You have to save yourself. Oh my word, I opened this thread to say this, and this was the first post at the top of the page. I was a very depressed young person, and I was waiting for someone to save me. To say hi, to ask how I was, to show me love. It never happened the way I needed it to. With the help of antidepressants, I realized everyone is busy with their own crap, and it's up to you to pull yourself through yours. Story 9. This is for the people pleasers like myself. You can bend over backwards for everyone, be a doormat, make it your life goal to avoid confrontation, and you're still going to end up being the supervillain in someone's story by the time you hit 30. You're writing your own story. Set your boundaries and realize no girl/guy, vice, or amount of money is worth compromising them. And I'm still working on myself to be stronger around bullies, and it's not easy, but I won't give up. The hardest part is that when you've been nice, comprehensive, and always tried to please everyone around you, even your closest friends aren't actually happy to see you stand for yourself. Because sometimes it also means telling them things you've been holding in for years. Story 10. By the time you hit 30, all the small things you've gotten away with that everyone bugged you about starts catching up to you. Bad posture, welcome back and neck pain smoking, welcome a strong cough, never stretch, welcome tightness, bad diet, welcome various health issues. You always feel invincible when you're young. 30s where you realize you were wrong, and sunscreen. Dear God, please wear sunscreen. Your 40-year-old face will thank you, add laziness to the list. If you spend most of your teens and your 20s coasting on natural talent or just being basically disengaged, it's gonna be very hard to change that habit when you're 30 and want things to change. Story 11. People have made harsh judgments on how I live my life. I have always taken care of my body even though I may have had some substance abuse problems in my past. I'm 42. I have all my teeth. My body only aches if I sleep badly, and I like the way healthy food makes me feel. If you're getting up there in age and still eat like crap, drink too much, and don't work out, then it's going to get really, really bad for you. Just pick one vice and just choose to take care of yourself 80% of the time and try not to harm yourself too much 20% of the time. Story 12. I was a smoker and a vapor for a couple of years, but quit when I realized that I was getting winded climbing up the stairs to my apartment. I lived on the 7th floor, so getting winded was okay, but I was struggling to make it up to just 3 flights. I should have taken at least 5 to 6 to start feeling it. I've been smoke-free for almost 2 years now, and I recently had COVID. While I was recovering, I tried to go for a light run and realized that my lungs felt almost exactly like they had back when I was smoking. In that moment it hit me just how badly I'd been treating my body and how glad I am to be free of that crap. Do not smoke. It sucks. Story 13. Don't drive when you are sleepy. I feel asleep driving after working night shift. I was in a coma for 2 weeks and partially paralyzed. After 4 months in the hospital, I was medically retired from the U.S. Army. Before the accident, I was in great shape and I was running about 10 miles per day training for a race. I have not been able to run since the accident. Lesson: don't drive when you are sleepy. You could die or hurt someone else. Story 14. Just because your friends are your friends doesn't mean that your work ethics/values line up. Friends can still screw you over without doing so intentionally. Heavily abridged. TLDR lived with 3 best buddies from high school for several years who were all older than me. They screwed me on rent and utilities for years because they didn't want to be responsible. I am out thousands, having kept us warm and not homeless. Story 15. People don't really attract like-minded people. If you're a normal person, you think along the lines of the golden rule. But I'll tell you this, there's gonna be someone you consider to be a friend who's going to not only disappoint you, they're going to hurt you, and they're not even going to value your friendship enough that they care to rectify that. They might even enjoy it. You really have to dig your heels into your values and stick with them. I tolerate a lot of nonsense behavior from my friends, but never something that hurts somebody else, especially another friend of mine. Never pictured myself genuinely telling a friend, I'm disappointed in you, but that's growing up, I guess.